Cool, I'm recording. Thanks everyone for joining office hours today. This is the 29th edition. There's not much happening in the last week that we need to talk about apart from the Geth split last week, but I'm sure everyone is aware of. We'll go over that in a bit. So let me start with the Ethereum repo watch. Nothing has happened in the last week as far as I'm concerned, but we also have like new versions of 𝗟𝗂𝗂𝗧 as usual. They fixed a bunch of stuff in there, mostly related to trace filter calls when you're using data there. But yeah, that's kind of it. Other than that, we can probably talk about the stuff that was happening with Geth nodes last week. So not sure if we covered this in the last office hours, probably not. But there was a security patch released by the Geth team to address some concerns about like some very important vulnerabilities, and apparently it got exploited for people that didn't upgrade in time to the latest Geth release, and kind of like half the ETH network basically split off the chain. It was quite interesting to watch, but thankfully it seems that the miners managed to upgrade in time so that the chain itself, it's the right one in terms of like the block height and all that stuff. So yeah, then the right chain is also faster than the forked one. I think it's solved by now. Not too many old Geth nodes are still there, but yeah, it's quite an unusual situation. Last time this happened was I think before Berlin fork earlier this year, and something like this happened as well back then. So yeah, if you haven't upgraded your Geth nodes, please do it ASAP. And if you found yourself being on the wrong Geth version with a forked chain, you'll have to delete the rewind the subgraphs and delete the ETH call cache if you want to have the right data on them. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. Is there anything else I should cover? Stake machines, you know? I guess not. Cool.
Everything's cool.
Yeah, yeah. It was
mentioned everything.
Yeah, it was a pretty chill week apart from that that thing that happened. Yeah, so we could probably jump into repo watch. We have Adam here that he wants to talk about the latest graph node release 0.24.0. Welcome, Adam.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Yes. So I think this was mentioned or noticed by someone in the Indexes channel last week. But Leo's tagged a new version of graph nodes. So let me just pull the notes up. But essentially, yeah. So it's a new version, and the main change here is actually like predominantly subgraph developer facing, in that it introduces a new API version. So essentially what's run or what's available when your sort of mappings are being executed from using the assembly script version, I think 0.6 to the latest version, which is like a pretty big jump. I think this hasn't been upgraded since inception, and so it's quite a big change, and like what makes this a bit complicated is that obviously if developers are going to be deploying subgraphs using this new API version to the network, then there needs to be sort of sufficient indexes supporting that, and so I think it's the first change along those lines. But yes, so the main change is the introduction of this new API version with the assembly script upgrade. The nature of it is that GraphNode can support both the current version, so 0.6, and also the latest version, depending on the API version specified in the subgraph manifest, so which will be sort of 0.0, 0.5, and so that's the major change. There are some other like small tweaks in terms of metrics, but nothing else, and indeed like nothing should actually be sort of breaking in this upgrade. So I wanted to sort of let people know. I think we're encouraging people to make this upgrade. We're going to be rolling out the sort of corresponding sort of CLI and GraphTS versions. But yeah, as I said, we need to do this in a kind of phased way because otherwise subgraphs could be deployed which indexes aren't ready to index on the network.
Sounds good. Do you guys plan to release some kind of announcement for indexers? I'm not sure that we have any official announcements for like indexers to upgrade to those versions.
Yep. So that's sort of pending after today's discussion. Like I know you've been running the latest version for a while, and it seems like it's I guess been smooth sort of sailing so far. But yeah, I was going to send that sort of announcement later today or tomorrow.
Yeah, it's been pretty smooth for us. Cool, sounds good. Right, I guess we could talk about something that I found in the GraphNode repo is related to one of the issues called return POI for failed subgraphs. Can you talk about that, Adam? Because I find it interesting. Is it simply just returning the last POI that the subgraph encountered, or is it constructing a POI based on how it failed or things like that?
Yes, so that's the last. Yes, I can talk to that and the other change, which I guess went in sort of tail end of last week, which is the sort of feature detection for subgraphs, which is one of the sort of outstanding things for the arbitration charter, and this is the other one, which is effectively that so the precise implementation, I think does capture the nature of the failure, but essentially creates a POI for the block where the failure happened. There's some discussion on exactly the way in which we're gonna do that, but it looks like effectively be saved as a POI in the regular way. There are some like considerations for like when the like handling reverts and those kind of things. But yeah, I don't know if you had sort of specific questions or things.
Yeah, my specific question was like, if that's generating a POI for the block that failed, does that mean that we're gonna close allocations with that block, like in the future?
Yes. I think I slightly deferred to Brandon. I don't know if he's here yet, but this is one of the blocking things on the arbitration charter, which was clarifying what was expected to do for failed subgraphs. And yeah, so I think it's that you could close allocations using that sort of failed block, and it would continue to be sort of applicable.
Interesting. That's, I guess, much better than using the start block of the epoch.
What I think is the intention here is to allow you to use the POI. The POI is not going to change from the fail block onwards, but that you can use that same POI for any future block, exactly so that you can keep using that POI, as the one for the start block of the epoch, or a recent POI.
Yeah, that sounds great. Cool, and I suppose the indexer agent will somehow detect that if the subgraph has failed, it will fetch that POI, right?
I'm not sure how that works on the indexer agent side, but GraphNode will, instead of replying with a 0x POI, it will reply with the POI of that failed block for any block in the future.
That's great. Cool. Awesome. I think that's a very much needed change, especially for us on the network. Cool. Is there anything else we should talk about? I haven't been digging through PRs as much.
Yeah, so I guess
yeah. Go ahead.
I guess I can talk. So yeah, so Eagle Eye might have spotted. Obviously there's the streaming fast sort of 𝗨𝗀𝗲𝗂𝗧 PR, but there's also some work on a feature branch supporting near. So that's very much in progress, and that's a focus I think for streaming fast and Edge and Node at the moment, to sort of adding near support to Graph Node. So
yeah, I think we talked about that last week. How's it going? Like, how much progress have been made on that, and when should we expect a release for that?
Yes, I think there's been some good progress in the last week. I think that, like, as with everything, like some of the implementation details and actually sort of getting the pieces running together is always a little bit more complicated than you expect. But I think we've made some good progress in terms of how exactly that will be rolled out. Like, Near obviously has the same sort of constraints as the other sort of non-mainnet chains in terms of how POI will work and how they'll be supported on the network. From a Graph Node standpoint, as I said, it's the current priority. And so I think at the outset it'll probably be supported within Graph Node, but not necessarily immediately on the network. But need to sort of spec that out and share.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I know it takes time to get things running on the network, because like we have to be considerate of everything that implies when you add different networks. So I guess we could probably see like EVM chains first, and then non-EVM chains eventually making it onto the network.
I was wondering the same thing. Is it the same change that are needed to support the other EVM-based networks, and then yet another change for other networks, or we're going to all cobble that up together? And I'd like to have a little bit of visibility on when is that scheduled? Is that work being done right now, or is it blocked somewhere?
I know from last time I talked with Ford a very long time ago, we needed some kind of a way to detect or have a bridge between chains to know when the Ethereum epoch started within the network, to find the block which was the actual start block of that epoch in the other chain somehow, to generate the POIs. That's the main concern as far as I know. One of the main concerns, I guess.
Yeah, so I think that Zach on the Edge and Node side has been looking into that. To answer your question around like whether that will work for EVM chains first and then sort of other chains, like I think the principle or approach, we'd want to have something that's kind of generic, in that it could be sort of applied to any chain, where obviously the challenge or maybe the bottleneck is the bridge between mainnet and that other chain. But I haven't had specifics on that in the last week.
How is an epoch intertwined with production of the POI?
Yeah, basically the
Are they
start
intertwined?
block. Yeah, the start block of an epoch will be needed for the graph node to generate a POI based on that start block and register it on chain when it closes the allocation. So it needs to talk between chains and find which block correspondent to that start block of the ETH mainnet. Basically, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe Ford can join.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Just joined after a meeting. Basically we just need to align the concepts of time between different networks so that we can use the POI system to have consensus on the data.
Okay, is it based on time or numbering? Let's say, because there's some other chains that don't have necessarily the notion of a fixed time, or not as easily as we like, thinking Solana here. So is it based on time or a certain number of blocks?
Right now, this is controlled by the arbitration charter, and POIs, when you close an allocation, you need to submit a POI, and you need to submit that POI for a specific point in time. Right now, that's just an Ethereum mainnet block number or block hash. And for some chains, it'll just be a bridge that links that block number to the corresponding block number on that other chain. Like you said, it might be a little bit more complex with other chains that have less consistent notions of time. There's also some related work on the contracts where there might be an update so that the close allocation call also takes a block identifier. So there's a little bit more specificity in what is submitted on the POI, and we don't need to have a canonical block number that's perfectly aligned across chains. So that might help.
Right. Because given, like I was discussing with, I think, was it Yanis, about sort of a spinal cord of block numbers. Who was that? Maybe Adam? Sort of a spinal cord of the block numbers and their corresponding block IDs and their corresponding time, in a way that we'd be able to very quickly, or was it Leo? Did we discuss that? Like we very easily query, like, what is the block just before that exact time? And that's an absolute, it doesn't need to be a number, and every chain could respond, what is the block? And there's probably only one, and it's consistent across every people, querying one block before or equal to a given precise time. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I think we discussed that, and well, at least like some of that mapping is relevant in a bunch of contexts, and that's even within graph. Like I think we were also talking about within graph node.
Yeah, exactly.
Like having knowledge about those things. But yes, I think having that, because obviously like Ethereum only knows about what's inside the EVM, and so I think that's some of the constraint. And yeah, so I guess like maybe a good idea. Yeah, we can circle back and make sure next week we've got an update on that.
That would be nice.
And you're saying that this is about an arbitration charter, meaning it's sort of I would say soft consensus. That is like social consensus, that the fact that you need to publish certain, a given block, and we will decide for other chains what it means, either a block number or a block for a given time, or for a number of blocks. Is that what I understand? It's a sort of soft consensus?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't technically enforced or verified like when you submit that close allocation. But when comparing POIs and then particularly when managing disputes, you have to follow these rules for how you submit POIs. So in the future, we'll move towards more. We're going to work towards moving towards proofs of verification rather than this kind of soft consensus. And right now the POI is so the idea is you need to submit a POI that's recent enough to prove that you have been indexing that data. So it's the start block of the current epoch. There are some proposals to start to tighten that time up so that indexers have to be closer to the head block. But right now it's set at the start block. And like I said, that's controlled by the arbitration charter. So it doesn't really require systems and code changes as much as charter and social consensus changes to update that. Plus a little bit of work in the indexer agent.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Right. Ford, can you talk about the upcoming agent release? When is that coming with the London type of transactions and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of small and some new updates and some feature updates in the indexer agent and the indexer CLI. I believe all of those are code complete and they're in the review process right now. So I can't give like a definite estimate on how long that's going to take, but I'm really hoping that that'll be in before the end of this week with a new release. Some things that includes are some updates to the indexer CLI to add output tables. So indexers will see the indexing rules when they do the status command, and they'll also see their active allocations and all of their active deployments and the status of those deployments. So a bunch of additional information. There's the support for type 2 transactions, which are the EIP 1559 transactions. And then there's a bunch of little things that I won't get into detail here, but will be in the changelog. So I think it'll be a good release, and then we'll get that out before the end of the week, and then start on the manual allocation that I know a lot of indexers are eagerly awaiting.
Yeah, that's something we definitely are waiting for. Like one example I could give. I didn't see that the one of our graph nodes, one of our indexer agents basically closed an allocation this morning, the only allocation, and then it didn't have enough ETH to reopen one, because I forgot that it had been funded, the operator was funded, because usually we don't keep them funded, but this one had like a fraction of like ETH there, and just found itself in the position to be able to close that allocation. And it was like I was confused at first, like what has happened. And yeah, I guess that the manual allocation mode for the agent would be very much needed and appreciated by everyone.
Yeah, I hear you. Can't wait to get that going.
Yeah, I bet. Cool then. Right, I guess we could probably talk about something that I think Stake Machine was talking in the POI channel. Let me double check. Or subgraph health. It's apparently a bunch of subgraphs started diverging. So it's the Omen subgraph, the Radical subgraph, and the old synthetics one that we all know that it diverged a while back for everyone. But those two are new. Is anyone finding itself in this situation? Because we have our Omen subgraph basically just failed. I think yesterday or 2 days ago, and the POIs on chain for Radical don't match within the last few epochs. Stake Machine, are you seeing the same?
Yeah, and also a few additional subgraphs. Maybe some POI generated with the Aragon and Open Ethereum are different. I don't know.
Yeah, that's super weird, because like I can't figure out why is this happening. I've seen this same divergence happening with some other subgraph. I forgot the name of it. I sent the details to for it. For example, I had two databases, one running on Open Ethereum, one running on Aragon. Everything was fine, but the last allocation was wrong in the Aragon one and true in the Open Ethereum one, just one allocation. So what I did was rewind those subgraphs 4 days prior to that divergence, just to see if Aragon itself is borked or not, or if I rewind it, does it write bad blocks. So it did not. So like every time I tried to rewind, basically the same thing happened. Only one allocation one that was divergent for some reason. I'm very curious to see within the next few days how is this going to evolve, because yeah, for me it doesn't really make any sort of sense of what could be happening there. Maybe Ford can give me some sort of clues, but yeah, it's super weird. I have a list, by the way, with subgraphs that I had to rewind, Stake Machine, which were, yeah, none of those that you posted there last time I checked, but I checked like a week ago.
I checked today, so a few of them I tried to rewind for the previous epochs that had matches, and no luck, still mismatches.
Did you delete the ETH call cache? Because if you don't, you're gonna write in the same data.
No, I will check that.
I can send you. I'm sending some instructions. In which channel should I?
So you rewind. What does that mean? You have a command to do that, or is that you go to the database and you start truncating things or removing? What do you mean by rewind?
There's a command within the graph node itself called, like a mini program called graphman, which has some scripts that you can run, and it will basically undo all the transactions that happened in the database in the order they happened. So it essentially rewinds the data back to a certain block and the block hash, and you can start over from that block.
Okay, I see. So it goes to all tables for all entities and truncates based on that block range thing, I assume?
Yeah, I guess.
That's basically it.
Steak Machine,
Leo?
I posted some instructions if you want to.
Yeah, thanks. We'll check.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, it's basically that block range operation as it works when we revert blocks.
Okay, thanks.
So this is really helpful that we're finding these cases, and you guys are doing a bunch of testing and rewinding and resyncing and identifying where there's divergence. I think that one of the clear next steps is to go in and try to root cause these divergences. So if we can all be trying to gather these situations, and then we can look at the entity changes, how they're different between the divergent sinks, and figure out why they're diverging. Is it? Yeah, I'm not going to make speculation now, but that's where we need to be going. So we have this Aragon working group. I think that's a good place to discuss this kind of investigation. If you guys want to bring some of this data to that working group, that would be super useful, and we can start to help each other out in root causing some of these divergences.
Yeah, that sounds great. Do we have an ETA for like when we will have the tool within the agent, I believe, or what was it that was dumping the tables that were needed for analyzing divergences? I think you were working on that.
Yeah, Aaron on our data team is working on that. He has a proof of concept working internally right now, and then we're gonna, by the end of the week, try to apply that to some of the active disputes, and then reach out to some of you guys for some of these active divergent data situations and use that tool, see how it works with that, and then we'll, over the next week or two, we'll keep iterating on that tool to make sure it's what you guys need.
Sounds great. Oh, cool. I guess that will be very much helpful, because like people and myself just prefer having to bash a single command rather than going through multiple things and then uploading stuff over to Google Cloud or something. So yeah, I guess it will be much helpful.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned that in these index or office hours before, but in case anyone missed it, just some background. This tool will be integrated in the Graphman CLI, so you can just run a single command to share your POI tables with a debugging server that we'll host, and then a follow-up command to share the other data. So this will hopefully massively simplify this whole process, and reducing that friction, we can actually be sharing all the data for all these situations and get to the bottom of it.
Hell yeah. Automation is king.
Oh yeah.
Right. Cool. I don't really know what to talk about next. Let me see. I think it was Data Nexus who said, "Can I throw a plugin double checking that query fee structures are set on the indexer's side?" What do you mean by that? I'm not sure if you can hear us or have a mic. Well, I guess he's not around.
I'm guessing that was a reminder for indexers to set their cost models.
Yeah, but like even if they don't, they will still default to something and still be queried via the gateway side.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend everyone set them, if only for the possible eventuality that you'll need to manage query volume and DDoS vectors, but right now, yes, the gateway does have default cost models.
It would be nice to have that within the like a local global, just like we have the one for the allocations. So we could like it would shadow everything below it in terms of like how the commands work, how the rules are set. So we could set a global rule, and then you can have like individual stuff that was overriding it if needed for the query fees.
That would be great. I think we have that tracked in an issue on the indexer repo. If not, we should make one to make sure that that's tracked.
It must be, I think.
Right now the global is set on the gateway side, but it would be much better if indexers could set their own defaults based on their strategies.
Yeah, I mean the gateway defaults are not bad either, so I would still leave that as a very last resort in case like no one sets neither global nor individual cuts fees. But yeah, it'll be very nice to have. Yeah, so until Data Nexus is back to talk about what he wanted to say there, I guess we could move forward, but I have no idea what to talk about next, to be quite honest. It's been a quite slow week, in my opinion. Maybe we could have Alex from Streaming Fast talk about the fire hose and what other indexers have been doing there, because I haven't had time to dig into that.
You want to fill some time, so I can speak for hours about these things, but so quickly about the fire hose. I think the interesting next bit is going to be Sparkle, but maybe we take some time for that. I know Kuhn and a few other folks have been spinning off the fire hose on Polygon, on BSC, and on mainnet. I think Kuhn he's at I don't know, 6 million. BSC gets very dense at some point. I think around 6 and 8 million it gets even denser. So it slows down. He starts all excited, and then at some point starts dragging. So, but he's soon going to have like a lot of the fire hose blocks, the merge block files, and he'll be able to start indexing some things with the Sparkle tech, the parallelized version. And there's a few folks also that were excited. Some people he brought in running some things on BSC. A full team, I know, they were 7, we had a call. And so, and they want to try that. They want to try to see how fast it can get in parallel. And so their challenge right now is to get a hold of those block files so that it can run in locally and then process fast and develop a bunch of code to process faster. I don't know. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's a great intro, I guess. So, not sure if you saw, but I think Noviba found something that his mind reader, I think it was keeping all the blocks that was going through, and eventually had his BSC archive hitting 2.7 BSC data, sorry. On the mind reader hitting 2.7 terabytes, but he found a way to delete something or prune that state or something.
Right. So, these mind readers, they do not need to be archive nodes, but I think a lot of people started by having archive nodes just because it was required for some other subgraphs. But when you're doing the firehose thing, a simple full node is sufficient. So probably he was dragging, I'm not sure, isn't he here?
Yeah,
maybe he can tell. Yeah, you don't hesitate to jump in if there's anything weird and we can help here. But yeah, so simple nodes is less, bulky and pricey, easier to move around and back up. So, Viva, was that an issue there?
We can't hear you, Noviba, by the way.
Oh, yeah, can't hear you.
Maybe you can dig into the settings. Try to put your microphone on push to talk, maybe. See if that helps.
Anyway, so we're prepping some presentations also. I was wondering maybe I should have the Sparkle presentations be on a YouTube and in different segments. So some for the indexers, some for people who want to dabble with how to do some subgraphy stuff. And a small note, we've been working also on the sushi swap. Sushi swap was taking 3 weeks for them to sync, and they had a pain. So we turned it into a Sparkle-based thing again to try it out and to sort of stretch the capacity of that experiment. And so now we're syncing Sushi Swap in 2 hours. That means from the full history down to Postgres database re-index. And probably 15 to 20 minutes it goes into, providing all of the data. And we also included a POI implementation. So that means this subgraph could actually participate truly in the decentralized network. And I was interested in those POI discussions before because I was wondering, why is it blocked on the network? But this POI implementation is very simple, was designed really just to allow us to find discrepancies fast. So it does hash everything, but it's less robust. It's not cryptographically secured as, the ones that is designed in GraphNode right now, but it might as well allow us right now to not need to be run on EOS on Ethereum mainnet, but the POI would be legit, computed, validate the fact that it's the same by everyone, like idempotent or consensual, right? The same for everyone, and and it could participate in the network. So I'd be interested in maybe chatting with a few people who are more knowledgeable than me to see if we couldn't actually ship some subgraphs that have a lesser POI, constraint on different networks. And that would work also on Near or on BSC or Phantom or whatever, Polygon. So yeah, let me know if that's just an oddity, or if I've missed some things, or it's just a stupid idea.
Wow, that's super interesting.
Not,
Go ahead, Brendan.
not a stupid idea at all. I think I can't recall what hash function they ended up using in the GraphNode, but I believe they also chose one that wasn't optimized for cryptographic security. I think it was optimized for performance. The idea being that for these POIs, things like hash collision aren't as important for the way that they're being used. So I'd say definitely a legitimate choice in the design space. I know Zach. I don't know if you've had a chance to connect with Zach from the Edge of Node team. Alex, he did a lot of the initial work on. Yeah. So he'd be a great one.
It was a great conversation. I really appreciated that.
Yeah. So he's also been looking recently at what it would be required to support some of these POIs on non Ethereum mainnet chains, right. And the kind of the sort of classic requirement here is just that there needs to be sort of a deterministic POI that is submitted as of a certain block or as of an epoch. And the current thinking has been we need to specify a canonical bridge for any non-Ethereum mainnet chain, so that there can be, when you're submitting a POI as of a certain block, there's some canonical block on the other chain as of which you're submitting a POI for it. And I don't think that the heavy lifting there is theoretical. I think it's just doing the manual work of looking at each of these different chains and figuring out exactly how each of these bridges works and specifying that. So I'm thinking, because we were discussing, I think Leo, was it not with you or Lutter? We're discussing about that block service, a small service that would just be there to answer some very basic questions about a chain. Give me the block number or the block hash at a block time, or give me it was for navigating. Leo, you help me out, man.
It's for
navigating. Yeah, sure. Yeah, because GraphNode, if GraphNode is no longer storing the blocks, it's referring to Firehose for storing the blocks. We need not only the stream of triggers, but we also need sometimes to ask questions about if the head block pointer of the subgraph, and given the hash for the block being queried, is that an ancestor of the chain head pointer of the subgraph. So is the block being queried and the subgraph on the same chain or fork?
Right. So it's more for consistent queries when you're querying near the top, but the same service could serve as a really sort of cross-check or checkpoint on the different chains based on time. And that would be deterministic, right? The block just below or equal to that particular piece of time, that would be blended in. That little service could be living either nearby, but indexers might want to have that when they're dealing with a given chain. It's a very, very small subset, but because we had a service like that called block meta in a very tiny k-value store running on disk, and most of the time was running in memory, really, because it's and quickly queried. So maybe that could do the job.
I think that's definitely in the design space. I know Zach was thinking about something similar as well, as like a graph specific. You can almost think of that as like a graph specific bridge, between these chains and the mainnet. That's, a bridge that's just for the purpose of indexing. The other sort of big category of options in the design space would just be to look at the sort of canonical or like best in class bridges that these other L1s are already building for themselves, or in the case of an L2, there's kind of intrinsically a bridge there. So projects like Near and Solana, as a sort of a strategic decision, they've built best-in-class bridges between themselves and Ethereum because they want to benefit from the network effects of DeFi, on Ethereum. And so I could see an argument for not introducing additional trust requirements by introducing like another bridge in contexts where like a bridge already exists between, a best-in-class bridge already exists between like the L1 and Ethereum mainnet. But it's definitely in the design space. I can definitely see reasons, expedience being a big one for exploring that as an option as well.
Help me understand, what's the need for having a full-blown bridge that brings data from one chain to the other? Is that necessary for something when it comes to time to publish a POI at a given place? You need to just, give me an agreed upon block number. Is that not what's the necessity here?
That is the necessity. So yeah, so our requirements within the graph are far more narrow, right? Like, as you say, really it's just about figuring out reconciling these two different notions of time so that you can submit a POI on one chain for a block on the other chain, and it's like there's a canonical block there. The only rationale for sort of using these like more robust bridge designs would be that dApp developers themselves will already be using these bridges for other parts of their architecture, right? So if you're building a dApp that's integrating Ethereum and Near, for other parts of your stack, you're going to be leveraging that bridge as part of moving data or financial assets back and forth between the two chains. And so you would want your read layer to sort of be consistent with what you're doing at the write layer. And there's a slight, and probably to use the same trust model, there's a slight risk that if we have like a different set of bridges that we're using at the read layer, the graph, and then there's other bridges that are being used at the write layer, that maybe those things end up being inconsistent in some cases. That would be the concern.
Okay, you mean something that will have occurred at a given block and then is slowly transferred to the other chain, and so the other chain is in sync, but 5 blocks off of what we say when the bridge has done its job, right? Let's
exactly. Yeah, you're introducing another notion of reconciling time between the two chains where one might already exist.
Right. At the same time, this is for indexers. Like, app developers never need really to be under the hood of the indexer and choosing a block. It could be off by 75 blocks, provided the POIs are the same and the indexers agree. Right?
That's true. So you could still specify as like the consumer of the data, like what block as of which you want the data to be supplied. The use in the graph is pretty narrow, which is that it's really about what's the canonical POI to submit for the purpose of indexing rewards.
Right. Very cool. Okay.
Hey, there's the dude building like atomic clocks on PCI Express cards. We could use those. But yeah, very, very interesting.
I take the spanner approach.
Yeah, super interesting and super nice to hear those details out, I guess. Yeah, but circling back to what you said, Alex, we could definitely bring one of those subgraphs. I'm very curious how that sushi data compares like to what we currently have on the network. Does it still have the same tables within the Postgres structure?
So we took, so the approach, for those who haven't read that Pancake Stories, we took the mappings and we fed them through the Firehose. Basically, it's what we're trying to do right now with the Firehose within GraphNode. We did externally before we sort of decided to work together, right? We did it externally, so we have a Go program fed by the Firehose, and we sort of made some code gen around to provide an experience that's very similar to subgraph development, in that there's handlers, and then you would put your code in the handler and you'd interact with entity, save and load, and all these things are all code generated from the same GraphQL schema that you provide in your mappings from the traditional, the GraphQL schema that we all know and love. But it's in Go, and it just spits out to the handlers in Go. And that's where we sprinkled the parallelism, right? It was our test bed. It was a place for us to experiment. And so for the sushi thing, the same as for Pancake, we just took the assembly script code, and we transliterated it, right? We just made sure it was the same thing. And one time or two, we made a typo, like forgot token 0 was token 1 or whatever, and the data was wrong until we found out that, okay, now we have the exact same logic, same handler name, same function name. We just literally transliterated. So it's the same thing. And we have all the same tables, and actually we have the same data also as the subgraph that was written in assembly script. Now, what we did also is we added the parallelism to that. So just with the sushi where we added the POI, well, now we had certainty that everything was produced in parallel could be, like, after 15 minutes, verified to be equal to the one run linearly. If we were to run things linearly, we had the same info. So POI, we made it also sort of work through that. But so the thing runs in stages. But I don't know if I could dive into that. It'll take some time. But
I was more just curious of, like, if we have a way to compare the data directly between the two subgraph deployment schemas, basically.
Yeah, we wrote some API compare scripts running a bunch of queries at different block heights, different sort of shapes of GraphQL queries, and we ran them against one and the other, like that iteratively to make sure we had the right data. And we found bugs, right? One of the core things is we found issues in the code that we both had implemented, but we were able to much more easily fix them because we would take just an hour to iterate through the next run and then fix another bug. So that's how we were able to squash dozens of bugs, and that's why it's important to have data agility. That's why I think it's cool.
Will this happen with every subgraph, or is it something that you fixed on the node level? I don't know how to explain it.
No. Well, we found bugs in the subgraph code, right? Because we just figured out, it's the wrong ETH price. We took the wrong, whatever reserve. It was not the right data. There was a logic issue in the subgraph code, not at the node level. So that was found because we were able to iterate fast, right?
Wow, that's great. Especially my mind is just blown up right now, thinking about you syncing up that subgraph within 2 hours. This is just nuts.
Split it in chunk, right? Segments. Those are the things we'll be discussing, I guess, in the next few weeks. We had planned that on some core dev meeting, whatever, to discuss how we can make that fold in everything, to have that approach as an option, so that it's easily accessible, easy to design for, easy to rationalize about, right? Reason about. So, and what it takes also in the stack to accommodate what sort of new architecture or whatever changes need to happen for us to be able to achieve that.
Yeah, indeed. I wonder, how hard would it be, for a subgraph developer to publish subgraphs on the, let's say, hosted service and have it running with your tech instead of the standard GraphNode stuff that we have now.
Right.
But yeah,
it's a good question. A lot of unknown questions, a lot of not even sorted out issues, right? The deployment, when we think about parallelism, the deployment is necessarily different because the indexer is not just going to receive a small bit of code and then run it and wait. it needs to spawn machine, chunk history, determine the number of stages. You know, there's a lot more operational yada yada that needs to happen if you want to parallelize things. You need dozens of machines if you want to go fast, right? So
yeah, of course.
We'll be chatting about all these things in the next weeks.
So in terms of like open sourcing your code, how far are you with this? What else does it need to be open sourced? I know you guys started a while back.
Yeah, it's all open. It's all available.
Okay.
So if you go
great.
we sent posts on the forums. If you guys have not seen the forums, there's a thing called, I don't remember, Parallelism, Introduction to Parallelism, and then there's a link to that Sparkle thing, which is sort of the code generator, and the pancake swap, Sparkle-based pancake swap thing, which is sort of a sample, you know, of using that Sparkle.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all open there.
That's great. Cool. So yeah, I guess I could maybe find some time to jump into this, but every time I say that I manage to find some bugs within 𝗟𝗀𝗀 or the graph node, and I just start debugging, and it eats my whole day, quite literally sometimes. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, getting support right for 𝗟𝗀𝗀 is at utmost importance, just because Open Ethereum will be deprecated in like what, 3 months? So the only alternative that we'll have is Geth, that obviously doesn't support traces, and 𝗟𝗀𝗀, which is still buggy and it diverges on subgraphs more often than not, and yeah, we need to fix it.
One of the aspects, I probably said that already, but you know, one of the aspects I appreciate about a files approach, the fact that when you get some information that streams in, is a determinism. It's not like a firehose block is a firehose block. It can be checked for identity or, you know, equality on different parties, and the data is the data. When it passes through your handler, it's fixed. There's no other wonky network round trips, no other, you know, potential errors. We've hit a bug where, you know, we were doing a JSON RPC query to a node, and we expected all the error case that were documented, but at some point we figured, oh, there's an Nginx in front that yielded a different type of error, but you know, screwed our code because it was the same error code from HTTP's standpoint, but so we assumed it was an empty string, so all of a sudden we didn't pick up that token, and that had the whole history diverge. It's really wonky if you have remote queries where the transport itself, JSON RPC, is not itself authenticated. It's not itself going to give you assurance that on the disk over there, the data is as it should be. Like, it's tricky when you rely on a remote. So that's why I think the files approach is just more robust when we're looking for, you know, discrepancies. It's going to be on disk right aside, and you can reproduce it by just feeding it back again in a unit test, right?
Yeah.
Question for you, Payne, about your 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀 experience. When you say more often than not, do you literally mean that, like, you know, more than 50% of the subgraphs that you're syncing see POI divergences?
It's weird and hard to tell, because I don't know if it's me that caused those divergences because I was putting those subgraphs on and off 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀, between like 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀 and Open Ethereum, or for example, one time I connected my my graph nodes to a pruned node, a pruned 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀 node accidentally, but the data within 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀 was still 1.6 terabytes, but the node was running with prune mode enabled, so that the RPC knew that it was pruned, so it wasn't querying old blocks, and then the graph node just skipped all over the place. Like all those blocks were skipped. This is one case. Another case was I don't know. not upgrading Eragon from each release, like from each week after week, and eventually running into a bug where it couldn't migrate the data, and it was killing the SSDs if you're using a certain flag, and that also affected subgraphs with traces especially, but not only. At least this is what I was finding within my my tests. But yeah, I mean, people are reporting issues with Eragon within like that synthetic subgraphs, for example, but I'm not entirely sure where those divergences are coming from, and probably not from Eragon itself, but like from the way that subgraph works, I guess. But yeah, it's still like I'm trying to figure out, like, I'm not sure if you have been here from the beginning, but I have an ongoing issue right now with one of our nodes where I found one single allocation that was different between OpenEthereum and Eragon, and I can't, like, even if I rewind both databases and kill the ETH cache, I'm still ending up with the same data, which is really weird. But yeah, I just hope we find and nail those cases before OpenEthereum gets deprecated. Otherwise, it'll be a mess. I'm quite sure I'm probably the only person in the whole graph node ecosystem that's running Eragon in production right now.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering that as well. I'm starting to sync up an Eragon node because, well, we're using a hosted service for our indexer, and it's just not, it can't keep up with like wrapped ETH, synthetics. I mean, it just can't sync them fast enough, and it sounds like OpenEthereum actually syncing that, you'd get fully synced by the time it became deprecated.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, go with Eragon for sure. You'll have it up and running within 3 days if you're using good disks. Good disks, I mean NVMEs, and like if you want to have even better performance, just grab a huge machine with huge disks, sync it there, and then have your graph node and database within that same machine. We had like 100 times more, like, faster processing time on SushiSwap, for example, doing this.
Oh wow. Cool.
Yeah, for some reason latency is very important, probably because the way the graph node works when it calls for blocks is not parallel, obviously, so it has to wait until those blocks are reaching back the graph node, and then writing and then calling new ones, I guess. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, latency is definitely a very major factor when it comes to sync speed. Okay, cool. So I see War Follows Me from Rybina is saying that they're running Eragon as well, and then they're seeing Radical having different POIs. This is what we've just seen for like last few epochs. Those diverged, and we thought it was us. Cool. Anything else you guys want to discuss? We're a bit over limit here.
I have one announcement I want to share with everyone before we split. Next week we have our monthly core devs call next Tuesday at 8 a.m. PST, and we're going to have a bit of a different format this time, where we will not have a set sort of agenda or a formal agenda or any presentation. We're going to keep it more conversational and try to get everybody more engaged. And Joseph will be there, and Alex as well. If you have anything that you would love to get covered, I have posted in the forum the announcement. Just put it in there, and then we can pick it up from there, and then just have a discussion topic about it. But we're going to keep it conversational. Everybody is welcome to join the discussions, not unlike what we're doing here at Index Hours as well. It's sort of similar format that we are envisioning. And if there's anything that you want to get covered, just put it in the forum post and then we'll talk about it.
Right, that sounds good, Oliver. Thank you. Alright then, I guess we could wrap this call up. This has been the 29th edition of the Office Hours. Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see you guys next week.